A.m. So let's go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kirsten Robinette, and I am the Associate Director of Alumni Engagement. I want to first thank you all for attending our virtual breakfast briefing featuring Capital Law Professor and Director of Academic Success, Hara. Before we jump into her presentation, I just wanted to quickly share a bit of her background. Hara received her JD from Ohio State. She spent most of her career clerking for federal judges with roughly 4 years of big firm practice. She then started in academia in 2011, where she leads and teaches the Academic Success Program and other courses, as well as such as beginning and advanced legal research and writing and an elective of judging and the nature of justice. So without further ado, Hara.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Bright and early. Everyone's got their coffee, I assume, as do I. So thank you all for coming. I'm very excited to tell you about the law school's academic success program. I probably shouldn't have, led my bio with the fact that I went to a different law school, but I am intentionally, very purposefully at this law school because it's such a great place to be. So for a variety of reasons that you'll see through my presentation. Also joining us here today is my right hand, my research assistant, Emily Asher, who is a 2L student at the law school. And so occasionally she may share the student perspective, and I can't, I'd be remiss if I didn't recognize that our associate dean was kind enough to get up and listen to something that she already knows, but I appreciate her being here, Melinda Molina. So with that, I will go ahead and get started. Feel free to, have questions throughout, that's fine, or we could take questions at the end. Either way is fine with me. All right, so I'm going to share my screen. All right. Okay. All right. So today I was asked to talk about a website that I created for the law school, law students. It's called the Law School Playbook. And so rather than bore you with all the nitty gritty in the Law School Playbook, I decided to kind of tell you the story about how it came about. Let's first start with what is academic success? So I actually accidentally sort of stumbled into academia. It was always something I was kind of interested in, but I was really a practicing lawyer. I didn't set out to sort of join the academy. And our former dean, Rachel Janudis, was just a friend of mine, a colleague, and that I knew in the community, not very well. And there was this position open, this academic success position. And she said, I think that you would be great for that. I'd love to meet you for coffee and talk about it. I said, okay, I didn't know her very well. And so I met and talked to her about it. And she explained to me what it was. And basically, it's something that we didn't have when I went to law school, but it's one of those things that once I learned about it, I was like, I want to do that. Yes, that's a great fit. You're right. So in law school, what academic success, the department, which is the department of one, me, what our objectives are, my objective is to teach students to master the learning process. So above all else, my goal is to create lifelong learners. Students come to us having gone through K through 12 and undergraduate, sometimes other master's degrees, sometimes a PhD, but law school requires a certain skill set that maybe didn't fit with what students studied before, right? So I want to teach students to be very cognizant of how they learn, be aware of that through metacognition, thinking about their thinking, okay? And then, of course, we do in law school the doctrinal thing where we try and at least touch on most, if not all, of the subjects that are covered by the bar. So the goal in law school is to teach those subjects, but not everybody's going to be a property lawyer or a personal injury attorney, right? So people may graduate and practice an entirely different area of the law that we don't touch on at Capitol. For example, I saw somebody the other day whose expertise was space law. We don't happen to have a class on space law, but if you teach students how to be lifelong learners, in addition to fundamental doctrinal knowledge, the hope is that they have the ability to teach themselves whatever it is they choose to pursue or whatever comes up in practice. So that's where the lawyering skills fit in. We don't, even though the bar exam tests in a way that we have to memorize a bunch of information and get it down on the exam, that actually is very unlike the practice of law. I may have a few lawyers on here with me, and if we did that, that would be malpractice, right? Because we still have to look things up and make sure it's still good law and things like that. And so research, writing, the ability to analyze a new set of facts, together with the law, are lawyering skills that are essential to the practice of law. So that's a very general overview of what my goals are. And in the broadest sense, it's to help the law school and the students meet their objectives. I approach ASP with every student got in because we believe that you can be successful here, and it is my job to help you be successful. So that's a bit about what academic success is. In terms of getting a little more down in the weeds, I like to think of it as a peek behind the curtain of law school. So I went into law school my first semester approaching it exactly like undergrad. So I went to classes, and I was successful in undergrad. So I thought, sure, this will work. I went to classes, I took notes, I studied my notes, and I took the exam, which is absolutely insufficient in law school. That's not how we recommend studying at all. And my first semester grades weren't my best, right? So we greet the students right from the beginning with, this is how law school works, right? And this year, actually, academic success was not a separate program before school started. We gave academic success these skills lessons with full-time faculty members participating to every incoming first-year student. So for every first-year incoming student, we said, here's how classes work. Here's what your professors expect when you're in the classroom. Here's study methods that maybe you didn't use in undergrad, but these might help. We talk about time management and things that are really integral to the success of a law student, a successful law student. So the basic idea behind all of this is that some of you, depending on your age, may remember the movie The Paper Chase, which sort of sent chills up everybody's spine with the idea that they may have a Professor Kingsfield one day. And you always hear the law school story where, and I think this may have happened to me, but I graduated in the 90s, so who knows, where they say, look to your left, look to your right, only one of you is going to be left at the end of the year, right? And so a famous quote from that movie is, you come here with a skull full of mush, and if you survive, you leave thinking like a lawyer. So that is sort of the opposite of academic success. We are a school of opportunity. We sometimes let people with, non-traditional backgrounds in. We want to give everybody a chance to succeed in this profession. And so we say, instead, we have academic support, and we want you not only to survive here, we want you to thrive here. And that is how we greet students from day one and really carry it throughout their legal education. So yeah, my motto is sort of allow me to assist you to do your best. And I think one of the best things about academic success is that it's an opportunity for the students to feel seen and heard. And sometimes that's what they need, right? They need their individual needs addressed rather than, being in a large classroom where it's, where we sometimes use the Socratic method in the first year classes where the professor is asking questions to sort of elicit information. Academic success has a different approach where, we just say, we see you, we hear you, whatever your individual needs are, we are here to help you be successful. So how does it work? So it would be really easy, and I probably wouldn't have a presentation if I just had a class that students were registered in and I ran it just like a traditional podium class. But that's actually not at all how we run academic success at the law school, because it really is not a one-size-fits-all endeavor. Some people are really good at reading cases, but then when it comes to the writing, they're stuck, right? So we have to figure out a way to sort of creatively do academic success without the existence of a formal textbook, because there isn't a textbook that encompasses all of academic success. We offer it as sort of a value-added service to the students. So it's not for academic credit. The students intentionally do not get a grade because there's no sort of like intimidation of, well, my professor's going to give me my grades, so, I don't want to go to them. But the biggest impediment, the no grade actually helps because the students feel very comfortable, kind of explaining whatever skills issues they're having. But the biggest impediment in my mind is that law students often have no time. So if it's not for credit and I don't lock them up in a classroom and force them to listen to me, how do I get them to care and invest in the academic success program? So that's what I viewed as my challenge when I came and first started in academic success. So just to give you an overview, I'm sure some of you went to law school yourselves, some of you have known law students, and we have Emily here on the call who can attest to it. But basically, this is the average life of a law student. Some of our students are straight out of college. Some have children that they're dealing with. You may know that we have an evening program. So it's called a part-time program, but it's sort of a misnomer because they only take one fewer classes than the full-time day students who we tell to treat law school like a job, right? But students have family, hopefully some self-care mixed in there. That's what we want for them to be able to endure the 3 or 4 years. Often they have outside work, either part-time or full-time. They're looking for legal opportunities through our externship program or otherwise. They have a legal writing course. They have a full load of doctrinal classes. And I'll mention very quickly, we have something called integrated core competencies. This is one of the many things I love about Capital, is that I am not the only professor at all who's committed to teaching these skills to students. We are a law school that values, we are very student-centered. And so we value pedagogy, we value teaching students metacognition and using learning science, and we value really pointing out and being deliberate about teaching skills. So every first-year student has a session a week in what we call integrated core competencies, where their doctrinal professors teach the same skills that I'm teaching. So they get a touch in a lot of different places with this material. But then there's student orgs, faith, hobbies, and then 2Ls add on, additional heavier courses and more complicated courses, and then moot court, perhaps law review, leadership roles in the law school, and just overall an increased load. Like Emily is, working for me, and that's no small task. I couldn't survive without her. So how do I bring it to the students? And we used to have a model where we did workshops. And sometimes students would come, and you can imagine the best students will consistently show up at those, right? Not necessarily the students that you want to show up so that they'll, thrive and survive and thrive in law school. So I had to do some thinking, and I thought about, what do the students always sort of have near them? What are they always engaged in? Which is the same as all of us, right? Technology. Students don't go anywhere without their phone or, their earbuds and access to technology. And so I had the idea, instead of making the students come to ASP, I would bring ASP to the students so they could do it on their own time. And my theory is that they would see this as something great that Capital was offering. Okay, so view it as a unique service. Capital does so much to make sure that I excel as a student. And instead of an obligation, instead of saying sort of, we predict that you may be in the bottom of the class, right? And so we're going to put you in this class. That's a self-fulfilling prophecy. What we want to do is make the students feel good about themselves and have the initiative to take part in ASP when they feel it's right for them. But I wasn't sure what that meant. So I had to do a whole lot of thinking, and I came up with the idea of the Law School Playbook, which is what I sort of think of as my virtual textbook. It's my contents for what I'm offering the students. And that is a website. But only problem is I didn't know how to do a website. I have some technology knowledge, but I'm certainly, as a poli-sci major, not an IT major. So I had to do a lot of thinking and brainstorming. And luckily, the academic support community for law schools, we actually have a formal organization. It's called the Association of Academic Support Educator. We also call it ACE. It's a lot easier. I have great colleagues on there who I confer with all the time across the country. So I brainstormed ideas with them. I reached out to a friend from my undergrad at Ohio University, and I said, hey, you make law school, you make websites, let's talk about this. Can you help me through this? And she helped me through it. My husband is an artist. That's a little cartoon of him. And I said, I want to make this look unique. How can we do this? And so we kind of worked together as far as like the visuals of the website, but I still needed the content. And so if you ever visit my office, which you're welcome to once we get past this strange time in our lives, I have books on just about everything that academic success can touch. So I have books like Succeeding in Law School, but then there's a lot of non-law school books that really play into what I do, like Atomic Habits, like the Pomodoro method, which is a time management technique. I read about grit. I read about learning science, which is what small teaching is about, how our brains think and acquire knowledge and how you can implement that in the classroom. So I learned all about best practices for pedagogy, and I really dug in to try and come up with valuable content. So it ended up being, after all of this conferring and relying on others and acquiring knowledge, a website that had a podcast and a blog on it. Because I thought podcasts, I kept the podcast around 10 minutes or under, and students can listen to that on their way to school. They can remind themselves of things, if they want to hear it again, perhaps in between classes. The burden is not a high one to access the information that I want them to have. And that was sort of my idea of how to do it. So the website itself is lawschoolplaybook.com. And you see here, just that's, sort of what it looks like. And, there's the podcast on there, but it's also on iTunes, Stitcher, wherever you can get podcasts. And I wrote them in the form of letters, these podcasts, and the scripts are also on there so that people can read them if it's not a podcast person, because I want the students to feel like I'm speaking to them, because it's not one size fits all. It's not, hey, this method works great for every law student. That's rarely the case. And so that's sort of the foundation of it. And the blog, and the blog is just sort of like whatever topics I'm seeing a lot of students on. So in terms of the podcast, I just wanted to sort of list for you. We're not going to go through all these, what kind of topics are covered. So I broke them down into different series. So case reading is so vitally important for lawyers, in law school, beginning students. It's very challenging, even through your second year. So I did a lot of reading and sort of curated the best content about, reading purposefully, reading, with intention, role playing, all the things that help reading be more efficient and effective in law school. So that's one series. Another and this came out of a committee that we had to sort of assess our students where we wanted to help them more. And we realized that statutes, working with statutes, which is very common in practice, is something that's not really emphasized all that much in law school, at least when you compare it to how much you use statutes in practice. So I did a series on reading and interpreting statutes, logic for critical thinking. So, really just breaking down analogical reasoning, and deductive reasoning, and, walking the students through this type of thinking and how it plays into law school exams. And then finally, the piece of academic success that's certainly not in the books is, the mindset material. Your mindset really matters and can have an impact in law school. So I made, again, curated what I thought was the best contents on these topics, and I made podcasts that hopefully they can listen to over and over again on that mental wellness piece. So the thing about sort of putting content out there is that it depends on how you use it, right? You have to use it in the first instance, right? So, just using some skills historically that worked well for you in terms of memorizing, maybe note-taking, that's sort of good. That sets you in the right direction in law school. But better is to listen to the podcast, develop these skills. I created exercises that I only offer to Capital students. So those are not on my website. That I give feedback on. And so if students submit it, they'll get feedback. That's better, right? But then the best is doing all of those things and adding in individual coaching. So students have the information, they've thought about it, they've worked with it, and then they could come work with me. And I'm willing to do that on their time, whether it's by Skype, in person, by phone. And so that's sort of the best case scenario. But then COVID-19 came and the podcast, which was very good, didn't seem like enough to me, because now the students need more and different guidance, right? So I had to go back to that, look for that light bulb. Okay, now how am I going to serve the students? Because even though the skills and the doctrine have remained the same, the landscape has changed, right? And this just threw everybody, faculty, administration, students, all of us, into a different place where there were different needs. So I had to go back to the brainstorming process. So this summer, I really dug in. I joined, I'm on a task force for ACE that's devoted to the issues that arise with academic success in COVID-19. I relied on my colleagues across the country who have been teaching legal writing remotely for years. They were sort of the experts to me. I went to far too many webinars, and I watched a lot of YouTube videos on best practices and what the student needs are and how remote learning, changes. And I used a book like Small Teaching and instead switched to Small Teaching Online and used listservs to sort of acquire the information I needed. And so the result was I not only, had the podcast, but now I've become sort of, an expert in making videos, which was entirely new to me. So again, I've broken the videos down into series. I tried to make them very approachable and brief, but you'll see, there's a series called The Basics, which is just the basics of studying, memorizing, and those are really, really short. And then, in collaboration with the faculty at the law school, I created these online learning videos. How to use virtual office hours. How do you learn through synchronous classes, through asynchronous classes? So those topics are covered. And then I came up with a more meaty base of material that I call the essentials. And these are longer videos. We use them in our remote orientation program that we offer to all the students. But the good news is orientation is about seed planting. Students can come back to this, over time. And really it's been successful. I mean, 4 months ago, I made the synthesis video and it's had 1.4 thousand views. I don't know who all those people are, but somebody is finding it helpful. So this was sort of taking the website to the next level. So this is kind of a random story to share, but it's what I think of on a daily basis. I have 2 children who are now teens, but when I was a new mother, I used to go to the pediatrician very worried, if my child was sick. And whatever my child had, whether it was the flu, croup, an ear infection, they always had a handout for me. It's hard to get all the information. They're always like, here you go, as I'm leaving. And I'm like, God, how do they have all this just at the ready, no matter what my child has? And it always made me feel better. So my goal with ASP and meeting with students was always to leave them with a piece of the information I gave them when they left my office, right? And this is really what the website does. It sort of makes it so that I'm with them all of the time, giving them this information, and they can access it anytime they want. And so to me, it's my way of saying, as my pediatrician said to me back in those days, rest easy. I have information for you. You're not alone in this law school thing. I am here. My job is to help you succeed. And Capital really cares. We have a person dedicated to helping you do your best. And so that's kind of how I came to all of this. And the website, and it definitely didn't form overnight. It took a lot of work, but I think it really seems to be resonating with the students. And I'm very happy about that. So that concludes my presentation. I will stop my screen share because I like to see you bigger. You all are little teeny squares right now. But I welcome any questions you have of me. If you have questions about the student experience, I have my trusted research assistant here. So I now open the floor for any questions.
Emily, what motivated you to get involved with this as Professor Hara's research assistant?
Thank you for that question. Oh, sorry, I have a little visitor. So I had visited her office in January to ask her advice about, I was applying for an externship with the Supreme Court of Ohio, and I found out that she had a background working in the judicial system. So I just went to ask her some advice about my cover letter and that sort of thing and the process. And then we kind of started talking about my background, which is art education. And we just kind of started talking. She's like, you know what, my RA is going to be graduating this year. I'm going to need somebody. And she's like, I think you might really like this. And I'm like, I think I really would. And so I definitely think I want to be a professor in the future. And I just thought and I really care about student learning. So it just kind of was a right fit. It just kind of happened.
Yeah, it really was very interesting. So what happens in my role, because I do talk to, I've had students come to my office when they're having panic attacks in the middle of exams, all sorts of things come up, because academic success isn't just reading and briefing cases and exam taking. It is all of the academic barriers to academic success. So life things, kind of interfere with what the students are doing. And so those need addressed too. So my office is just sort of a revolving door of people coming in for various reasons that may or may not be my job, and because they don't know who to ask. And if it's not my job, I send them elsewhere. But a student like Emily, at the time, we didn't offer ASP to everybody. We had it as a designated summer program that students could opt into if they paid. And then there were a group of required students or suggested students for which it was free. And Emily wasn't one of those students, but we just got to talking, and we got talking about pedagogy and, learning science and all sorts of things. And I was like, wow, you are a perfect match for me. So it was really just one of those lucky things. But I think Emily, hopefully, has also learned. I usually find that my research assistants learn a lot that helps them by working within the program too.
Yeah, that's definitely the case. Just for example, when I'm looking through the stuff, and then I might be struggling with my own schedule and my workload, and it's like, okay, just take a deep breath. I can do this. So yes, that is true.
Yeah, and students, the nice thing about having the coaching model instead of, the one size fits all model is that I build relationships with students. So as issues come up throughout law school, they return to me often. And so, your schedule changes at different times. COVID changed everything. And so what may have been working for you in the past might not work. And that can be really overwhelming because the work is still coming at you, right? So we sit down and we have a conversation about it. We map out a schedule, we make a plan, we brainstorm. Often what's successful with my students is sort of doing a step-by-step. Okay, the first thing I want you to do is X, then come back and see me. And then because it makes it manageable. But it's really nice because my job is very rewarding because I get to see students sort of light bulbs go off and watch them grow. I mean, it's a really, I'm blessed to have this job, truly. Other questions? And I will say for the folks who are here from, who work at main campus, one of the things that I've really tried to do, I actually, TMI, but I've had this job twice because I originally had it, when the bottom fell out in legal education and I didn't have a long-term contract and I knew that my job was in jeopardy. So I said, you know what, I'll take a step back. I'll go back to federal court, which is also a great place to work. But I continued my relationship and I taught as an adjunct and things. But one of the things that I did very intentionally when I came back is to try and forge relationships with folks on main campus because main campus has a very robust academic success program. And I've gotten great ideas from my colleagues over there. For example, the Student Success Committee, which meets on main campus, we replicated over at the law school. And so I've learned a lot from folks on main campus too. And it's just nice to have that relationship. And then for our students who start in undergrad and continue on, they're supported through academic success during their whole journey, which is the goal. Other questions? Well, as I tell my students, this isn't the only time. If you leave and something occurs to you that I'm wondering, she might be the person to ask about, of course, feel free to email me ask questions at any time. I did get a question in the chat. How does one evaluate a lawyer? So that is a really, really good question. The testing is completely different, really, than in undergrad. So in undergrad, I like to think of it as, there are certainly exceptions to this, but the general gist is we are giving you this information and we want you to process it and explain it back to us in a way that we know you understand it, right? That you can develop it and you understand it. In law school, our tests are generally, we sort of give you the law as examples, right? We work through cases to show how the law works. And then we give you an entirely new factual situation on an exam. And so we don't want to regurgitate. We don't want to hear exactly what we told you. We are expecting you to know what we told you and be able to apply it to a new set of facts. And the reason we test that way is that it's very consistent with the practice of law. Clients don't stumble into our offices and say, well, I have an intentional tort of assault that was committed against me. And, they don't know what they have. They come in with a big problem and say, I was walking in the aisle at the dollar store and a fan display fell on me. And, and then you get, well, I went to the grocery before and then after I couldn't drive home. And your job as a lawyer is to pull those important facts out. What facts matter for purposes of the law? What legal action exists? And how can I bring that to court and prove that on my client's behalf? So it really requires a different way of testing. And so one of my jobs is to, teach the students how to take this new style of test. And that's typically essay, but we also do multiple choice. And we're very cognizant of what the bar requires and how the bar tests. So we do bar style essays, a good deal of the time, and we do multiple choice questions that mirror bar exam questions, so that by the time the students have done this for 3 or 4 years, they have a level of confidence in their ability to do this type of assessment. And so that's sort of how we evaluate a lawyer. Does that answer your question? If not, let me know in the chat. And so the result is that there's a lot of sort of common problems that pop up in this new style of testing. So the students maybe don't know the rules as well as they do, as they should, or we call that a law problem. Or maybe they're not using the full range of facts. So when the person came in with the fan display problem, they weren't able to pull out the facts that really matter and apply them to the law. Or sometimes, very commonly, we have what's called fact listing. So they take the facts that the client gave them and the fan fell on them, and then they reach a conclusion. Therefore, there's a cause of action for X, right? And we say, no, you have to show your work, just like in math. Why is there a cause of action, right? Take that fact, apply it to the law, and tell us why it matters. So the question was raised, we vote on judges, but how do we know who is the best judge? That is the $1 million question. So I work for federal judges, which, as you know, or if you didn't know, you recently learned to have a lifetime appointment they're appointed by the president, confirmed by the Senate for life. And so I never dealt with judges who, at the time at least, were running for office. This is a really hard question to answer, and a lot of lawyers can't answer it well. If you want to hear what I think is the truth, I think a lot of times folks, if you're Cleveland and you're Irish Catholic and you're from the West Side and you have a familiar name, odds are that you may end up in one of those seats, right? Because you keep hearing the same names in judging over and over again. But if you choose to do a little digging, you'll see that judges get endorsements from different organizations. So, the ABA does a good job, or the local bar association does a good job of evaluating and sort of rating judges. That's one way. And judges often, it's a very grassroots campaign, so if you're interested, you can have an opportunity to attend an event where they're campaigning, or now probably watch them remotely. But because they don't show party affiliation, it's sometimes very difficult. So looking at who is endorsing them and kind of what their history is as far as an experience as an attorney is probably the best way to evaluate. But it is admittedly very difficult. My mom used to, she passed away a while ago, but she used to go and vote for the judges. And I would say, who did you vote? She would even have no idea who she voted for. She wanted to exercise that right, but she's like, I don't, so name familiarity gets you a lot of votes, unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, it depends on who you are. Other questions? One thing I'll add about judges is that, working for the judiciary was such great training for, working with students in this way, because, we were sort of, as one of my judges said, we were the last great generalists. We did everything from criminal to patent law to contract law. Everything is different every day. We had a saying that we would use, there's never a dull day. There's always something interesting going on in federal court. But you get to see the range of skills that are necessary and what makes a good lawyer and what doesn't, what makes a good advocate. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the A student is going to be the best representative. Sometimes it's the B student who at trial absolutely kills it, right? So I try to bring that to my work to show them, hey, these aren't just law school skills. These are the same skills you're going to need in practice, and make that connection for them. And then they see more of the value, I think. Any other questions? Well, I know you all have a long day ahead of you, I'm sure, as we all do in these COVID days. But I do want to thank you so much for your time and attention. This is something I feel very passionate about. I feel blessed to work at Capital and with our students. So thank you for listening and coming today. And with that, and feel free to ask me any questions, email me anytime. Always an open door. And with that, I'll give it back to Kirsten.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. That was really fascinating. Loved learning all about that. One of my friends just graduated from Capital Law, so it was kind of cool to learn a little bit more. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today, this morning. We really appreciate it. Our next alumni event is part of our Wellness with Capital series, yoga with a coworker of mine, Ashley Waltermeyer, on November 12th. So if you're interested, you can always visit capconnect.org to register. So, all right. Well, I think that's everything. Thank you all again and take care. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.